Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? A little louder, all right. I'm gonna do my best, guys. Is that a little better? All right. Good afternoon, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here, taking a break from the show floor. It is busy out there and appreciate you all spending some time with us. We're gonna make this session a little bit interactive today. We're not professors and we're not here to lecture you. So we're going to make this a little bit interactive. The first part of this is, and this is purely hypothetical, so let's do a show of hands. 15 years ago, try to take yourself back to 2011. How many of you fully anticipated next day delivery, 1 hour, buy online, pick up in store, labor shortages as the standard, global pandemics to deal with, geopolitical disruption constantly, and this thing called artificial intelligence as a line item in your budget? Anybody? Good, because we didn't anticipate that either. But what we're going to share with you today is that the supply chain is no longer invisible as it was back then, somewhat, until it broke. E-commerce was important, but it was sort of a bolt-on at the time. 5-day shipping was okay. Warehouse automation was something you did on a spreadsheet, and you hoped you wouldn't have to come back to it for another decade or so. And if someone said omnichannel, and this is with all due respect to our marketing friends in the audience, they thought you worked for marketing, and it wasn't really a thing yet. So fast forward to today, the supply chain is no longer a support function. It's core to the business strategy. It now determines how fast you grow or don't, how reliably you serve your customers, how much working capital you carry, and whether anyone ever shops with you again, literally. Here's the point. Most companies, they didn't plan that evolution. They adapted and they survived. So that's what this session is about. That's why it matters. What you're going to hear today is not slideware. In fact, we have very few slides for that purpose. It's a real multi-year, almost 15-year journey and more in some cases that started well before digital transformation was a thing. It evolved in real time. This is a story about breaking away from legacy, from 3PL models, insourcing what was special to what you were doing, embracing the complexity because that matters to your business, whether you perform or don't, modernizing technology as an iterative process, not a one-time event, building an omnichannel operation that didn't survive the disruption, but actually embraced it, leaned in, and moved the needle. Just as importantly, this is a story about transformation itself. What does it really look like on the inside? Today, success is not about installing a piece of technology, software, a piece of automation. It's about gaining alignment, literally what we do for a living, supply chains, connecting dots, making sure the whole thing works together, upstream, downstream, neighborhood awareness, pick an analogy. So as you listen today, I encourage you to think about where your own organization is. What assumptions do you have from 10 or 15 years ago that are still permeating through your business? Is that real? Is it a constraint? Question it. And if you were starting today, knowing what you know now, what you're planning for, what you maybe thought you needed to plan for 10 years ago, what would you do differently? That's what we're going to ask these guys. They lived it. So let's meet those folks, the ones who did the work over the last decade plus, and let's talk about what actually worked, what didn't, and let's get to it. So we have a great panel today. We've got Chris Visaggi. He's the Vice President of IT Supply Chain at Carter's. You all may have heard of them. There's a big building somewhere in Buckhead that has their name on it, a heritage brand. We'll talk a little bit more about that. From Chris's perspective, he focuses on technology and supporting the business, modernizing Carter's execution landscape. Next is Brad Grimsley. He's the Vice President of Fulfillment, Delivery, Trade, and Compliance at Carter's. He's been directly responsible for turning fulfillment into a core growth engine at Carter's and supporting their business at scale. Next to Brad is Adam Klein with Manhattan Associates. He's the Director of Product Management, and he brings the platform view. He has a great perspective on the industry, their wide customer base, and what they need to keep their businesses running. Next to Adam is Grady Bunn. Grady has a unique place in this account and has been here for many years working with Spinnaker and Carter's on this journey. He's a senior director and design architect, and he's worked at the intersection of strategy and ultimately product, bringing those solutions to life on the ground. Next to Grady is Joel Garcia, Senior Vice President of the Supply Chain Execution Practice at Spinnaker SCA. Joel's been around for a long time. We're not going to say how long. He's led large-scale transformations in many shapes and sizes, and he's cut across many verticals over the years, helping brands, organizations transform and enable their supply chain. Not just technology, but operating the business. And I'm Michael Murrison. I focus on supply chain execution and transformation at Spinnaker SCA. I've had the privilege and occasional scars, not literally, but I did sleep on the floor of a distribution center once. Over the years, working with Carter's, I've worked alongside this team for a number of years, many of whom are in the audience, and I reflect back on the journey, my own professional growth, working with these colleagues, learning a lot from them and what they were trying to do in their business. I'm also mindful of the fact that 15 years ago, I didn't have any kids. Now I have 3. So I also join you as an avid customer and a direct impact to the work we did at Carter's over the last 15 years. So briefly, we'll go through company intros. So who is Spinnaker and what do we do? We're a supply chain consulting firm. We focus on digital supply chain transformation. We enable technology, operating models, and ultimately impact business outcomes that can look a lot of different ways: strategy, AI, applications, and so forth. Adam, Manhattan?
Yeah, so Manhattan Associates, supply chain management software company. We do more than just warehouse management, although warehouse management is probably what we're best known for. You can see some of the stats and figures here. Founded back in 1990, not in New York, kind of on the other side of the country, Manhattan Beach, California, hence the name. But found our way over to Atlanta in '94, I believe it was. A lot of customers across the globe. And we'll talk about some of the things that make us unique, I think, along the way as we go.
Great. So I'll give you a quick introduction to Carter's. We are headquartered right up the road here in Buckhead, and we have several distribution centers on a number of continents. There are several distribution centers right here near the Atlanta area. We'll speak a little bit more about the large one up the road in Brazelton, which I have the privilege of working in. Carter's was founded in 1865 by William Carter in Massachusetts. And at that point in time, he was running his family was running a knitting operation. They knitted mittens for winter and did a little bit of clothing for undergarments for kids. Fast forward, that family owned our business until 1990. And at one point in the 60s, there were 7 mills here in the South producing products for Carter's. The family grew the business humongously from 1865 until they exited the business in 1990. At that point, some private equity firms took over, and then the company went public in 2003. 2005, so you see the Oshkosh brand here. That's when Oshkosh joined the Carter's family. And then we'll skip up to 2017 and Skip Hop, which I call the sippy cup of our company. So it's not clothes, but gadgets and toys and diaper bags, etc. We acquired that company and brought it into the fold. In 1999, we launched our first website, and at that point, it didn't offer e-commerce by any stretch. It was simply an informational website. It would tell you where to go buy stuff from one of our stores, and it would announce new product launches and give you a little bit of history about the company. It wasn't until 2010, much later than a lot of other retailers, that we entered the e-commerce or the direct-to-consumer market. And that was about the time that the decision was made that we needed a new distribution center. And so we got one, 1.1 million square feet. For those of you that are familiar with distribution spaces, 23 acres under one roof. And at the time, we thought, geez, this is cavernous, or the team that was there thought, this is cavernous. And it turns out it's not cavernous at all. We filled it up. And so that journey from 2012 until now, we'll have a little bit of a chance to talk about. But thank you for having us.
Yeah, Carter's is one of those heritage brands that you just know it when you see it. It's in family photos in many households, and it's been really interesting to watch the evolution. So you guys started really as a wholesale company, and then became a retailer very quickly. Hundreds of stores now across the U.S. and Canada, and so I'm curious, maybe Brad, to you. What does that North Star look like for you now, right? It changed quite a bit as you added those channels, and that evolution continues today, I assume. What does it look like from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would tell you, I think, I've got some of my colleagues back here that actually they should probably be up here answering that question. But I think as we grew, we were heavily involved in wholesale. In fact, if you go into Walmart, for example, you'll see Child of Mine. Target, you'll see Just One You. And if you go on Amazon, you'll see Simple Joys. So definitely heavily vested in retail and other doors. In fact, we ring, I think, in the neighborhood of 20,000 doors across the United States. But up until then, each of those channels grew sort of independently. Like first it was wholesale, and then obviously we got into store business. There's over 1,000 stores on the North American continent for Carter's, 850-ish, 835-ish here in the U.S. And then e-com, like I mentioned a minute ago. So each of those channels was really being managed almost independently. We tried to share inventory across those channels. And then 2020 hit. So for those of you that don't remember what happened in 2020, we went from being a 3-channel distribution center to being a 1-channel distribution center. We literally flipped all of the activities that we had invested in and all the processes to serve these 3 channels. We immediately had to figure out how do we service only e-com using that one facility. And I think that may have been a little bit of the impetus for us to rethink how we think about distribution and the use of our distribution centers. The journey that we're on now is more less about the channel, more about the customer. And what we're finding is that regardless of what channel that we are servicing, particularly with our brands, it's a lot of piece picking. It's a lot of individuals, a lot of eaches. When we're replenishing into our stores, sometimes it's just 1 or 2 units that are going into a SKU, not 1 or 2 units in total. But if you fill a carton of 50 units, there may be 35 or 40 different units in that carton. And same with our wholesalers. Our wholesalers are demanding that we prep cartons that can go right onto the store shelves. They don't want to have to touch it again once it leaves our DC. So our focus here in the last few years anyway around strategy and thinking about automation and technologies is how to unlock that. I'll overuse the word center of excellence, but the center of excellence around piece picking and making that work regardless of who the order comes from. So said a lot there, but we can get into more of that as we go forward.
Yeah, what strikes me is that any one of those channels in and of themselves are complex, particularly in retail, particularly with customer expectations, demanding wholesalers and so forth. I'm curious, Chris, from your perspective, sitting atop, technology strategy and really looking forward. Obviously, you all have been through, an evolution, sitting on, the Manhattan stack and investing in other enterprise technologies. And I'm curious, from where you sit today, what's in front of you? What are you looking to tackle here as you continue the modernization journey and evolving to support the business?
Yeah, Michael, another great question. I think all of us live in an omnichannel world today. This really started with customer and, including ourselves, being able to order a pizza and not only being able to track it through the oven, but also the delivery and where it is on your way to home. So it set just a whole different level of expectations for all of us and from a customer perspective. And it's all about near real-time visibility, right? Where's my order? And in order for us to fulfill that order, we need to understand where the inventory is. So from a technology perspective, the journey that we've on, and you're absolutely right, it is not a big bang approach. Those days are gone. It's a multi-year roadmap. It's an iterative approach. And for us, it's been about modernization. So aggressively moving to the cloud, whether it's our own private cloud or whether it's with our solution providers like Manhattan, but moving out of on-prem and data centers. And the benefits are obvious, but the big unlock there from a technology perspective is instead of spending bandwidth on maintaining infrastructure, you're really allowing the team to focus on servicing the business and meeting the business needs and not worrying about that infrastructure layer. Obviously, things like staying current is huge, being able to have access to the latest, greatest functionality and use that if you feel it's appropriate. And then, I think we'll talk a little more about the architecture and, solutions that's architectured with a cloud-first mentality or approach. But even for big, old, monolithic applications, if you move those servers to the cloud, there's still benefits in terms of scalability. Scalability is huge, especially for retailers, given that we're dealing with peak holidays and we've got to meet our customer demand. But I have to tell you, if you do have an application that is truly architectured for the cloud and services-based, not only does it unlock the scalability piece, but it also unlocks numerous other capabilities in terms of machine learning and AI. For example, with Manhattan Active, for the first time that I've seen this, we have machine learning in our environment that's actively monitoring performance, and it auto scales the environment automatically based on performance triggers. So given peak holidays where you used to have to scale the environments beforehand, the machine learning capabilities will also remember those cycles, and it's truly a non-event. But it's more than just moving to the cloud. Think about, in order to move to the cloud, move off-prem, especially in big distribution facilities where you used to have your server rooms in the facility because you couldn't afford any latency between the WMS and warehouse control and the material handling. Think about network infrastructure, making sure that you have state-of-the-art network connectivity, no dead spot in the building, and do that proactively, but also even scanning technology, state-of-the-art scanning technology, etc. So it's truly a comprehensive roadmap in terms of that. And like I said, multi-year journey, making great progress towards that and seeing great results. And then AI, all of us, you can't walk the floor without seeing or talking about AI, but we are very aggressively pursuing that currently.
So we're going to do, you mentioned real-time visibility. We're going to try something here in real time, if we can. This is going to be an audience poll. Okay, so real simple. Grab the QR code. Okay. Question is, where are you on your supply chain modernization journey? So Chris just spun on that a little bit. We're super curious to see where you guys are. Maybe Chris could help us pinpoint this a little bit. So not started, too busy, we're firefighting, we're tinkering, we're maturing, or we're transforming. So think sort of laggards on the left, leaders on the right. Chris, from a Carter's perspective, where would you score it?
I would break it into two sections. One is the infrastructure piece and moving to the cloud that I mentioned earlier. So I would say we're maturing in that space. When it comes to AI, I would say we're tinkering, but we're tinkering with a purpose. So many companies are waiting for AI to mature to figure out what technology they're going to implement. In my opinion, it's the wrong approach, and you need to get started. So consider things like wrapping governance and security around proof of concepts. We've got a steering committee. We're meeting on a regular basis. We're selecting business and IT team members to participate in those pilots. And at a corporate, so whether it's in-app AI with your solution providers, or whether it's a enterprise-wide AI, it doesn't matter. But the key is to get started, and like I said, we are very purposeful. So I would say tinkering, but aggressively pursuing these pilots. And if it's successful, we implement it. If not, we move on. And the last thing I would say, without naming the technologies, but at the enterprise level, we're already on our second solution. So the solution that's working best for you today is not going to be the solution that works tomorrow. So something better will come along. But as long as you have a group that's focused on that, and you can switch out the technology behind the scenes, but your users just keep on getting better and better and more productive using the technology.
Yeah, I'd second that. I think intentional tinkering is probably a good way to describe where we're at, particularly in the supply chain, the operations. We've identified different business opportunities that we'd like to apply AI to. But just to get grounded in tinkering, so my version of tinkering, maybe some of your versions of tinkering are different. But my team, that some of them are here today, will tell you this past Christmas, we had one of our managers dress up like an elf for a Christmas thing we were doing. And so I did anyway. I took a picture of the guy. And I managed to get Grok to make him dance. And I thought that was the coolest thing on the planet. We've gone from playing around with AI and trying to figure out what it can do and the capabilities, et cetera, having a little bit of fun with it, to being more intentional with trying to figure out business problems that we can solve with it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, guys. I'm looking at this poll, and about a third, right? This is not something that's sidecar, right? This is core to folks' strategies, and you see a lot of it out there. Obviously, we're seeing it at different levels of adoption. What we constantly hear from our clients is which needle is going to move when we invest in this thing, and those questions are obviously like, that's the point, right? I'm making an investment in a capability, and then what we're going to do with that, and the realities of having platform that's ready to adopt and actually launch those kinds of solutions is the hard work that comes before that. But Joel, from your perspective, I want to get you in here. I mean, we've worked with Carter's for 15 years. We've done a ton of projects, dozens literally of projects over the years across the supply chain. They've gone through a lot of transformation. What do you give clients in terms of advice going through a similar level of transformation in their business?
I think what Carter's did well, and suggest you do, is you stay grounded and aligned with your long-term business strategy. Of course, the business climate changed for Carter's many, many times in the last 10 or 15 years, but they stayed aligned with their business vision, right? From a execution perspective, I would keep 3 tenets in mind. One of them is people first. The other is prioritization and sequencing and prioritization, and then lastly, a partner strategy. A people first framework works because transformations are about 20% technology and 80% people. And what we have found is that the companies that are succeeding to the scale that Carter's has succeeded invest in change management as heavily and as seriously as they do in the platform that they're implementing. So I recommend you get your operators involved early. These are the guys and ladies that are going to really help you operationalize what you're implementing. They're the ones that really know where the friction is, right? When it comes to prioritization, not synchronization, don't try to boil the ocean. You know, as Chris was saying, they did this in phases and they had a roadmap. The companies that don't do well are the ones that try to do everything at once, right? And that's a bad strategy, because as business changes and the business climate changes, you have a harder time adapting to that strategy. So, you know, at Carter's, they had everything was done in phases. They didn't do it overnight. Every phase had a clear ROI story, and they had the ability to change as the business climate changed. Lastly, from the partner's perspective, choose your partners wisely, right? You need good partners. I think one of the reasons this worked at Carter's was because Carter's, Manhattan, and Spinnaker SCA were really aligned on outcomes versus deliverables. And that was a key tenet to the success of this story.
Yeah, it's amazing, you know, what a plan looks like after the project is done. You kind of go back to it and you say, well, did that go how we planned it? And to your point, Joel, it's really a commitment to, okay, well, what's the end point that we're trying to get to? And there's a commitment across the Carter's team and the partners to say, okay, well, it needs to look like this in the end. We don't exactly know how we're going to get there all the way. But being committed to that iterative approach and dealing with the alternatives when indeed you're faced with them. Brad, I'm super curious from your perspective. Obviously, retail is a challenging business, very demanding customers, very competitive. You know, I mean, this was hard, right? And it continues to be hard. I'm curious, you know, what are the things that you would kind of call out as, hey, these are the real big challenges that we have, not only maybe historically, but also looking forward and sort of running and fulfilling a business that really has 3 channels. You have some really impressive work that you guys have done in the distribution space, but what continues to challenge you guys moving forward?
That's a good question. I think for us, it's really flying the plane and changing the engines on it a little bit. So we have a kind of a unique strategy maybe from other retailers in that we believe in holding inventory at a minimum. So the building that I'm referring to is a single node for all of e-commerce in the United States. And it might strike some people as kind of odd, but it's a decision we made because of the price point of our clothing and the way that we facilitate handling. So what that means to folks that work in that distribution center, anytime you want to make a change, for example, some of the systems, we're exchanging them right now, but the hard work comes in running that facility and changing things, and it doesn't happen easily. The building runs 22 hours a day, 7 days a week, and so there's not a lot of downtime. As I mentioned a moment ago, it's a little over 1 million square feet, it's full, so I don't have white space or empty space where I can just stand something up and test it and make it work. You got to take something out to progress. But that's probably the biggest challenge is that. And then just from a market standpoint, I think what I said earlier, facilitating fulfillment, right? Just ensuring that when the customer order comes in, forget the channel for a second. Just it doesn't really matter. But once that demand signal comes in, what's the best way to get those units? And again, a lot of it is unit driven. What's the best way to get those units into a shipping carton or poly mailer and off to the customer as quickly as possible so they can get back into business? That's our biggest challenge right now. Is figuring all that out and building systems and automation around it.
Yeah, no, I like that. It's a good segue because in order to give operators ultimately the ability to do the thing that they want to do, they have to have a platform to sit on top of. Adam, I'm curious from your perspective. I mean, Manhattan has a significant install base in retail vertical. You guys see the pressure that they're under to deliver for their customers, very competitive environment. I mean, in terms of enabling technology, what are the things that you're hearing from retailers today where they're focused on kind of the bread and butter things, the things that everybody has to do, and then maybe some of the things that are coming, right? The things that they're looking forward to, and you're starting to hear from retailers and across the globe, really.
Yeah, so I think it really, as we think about the kind of the evolution of technology, I mean, you hit on at the very beginning all these things that are changing, that are putting pressure on retailers and so forth. And I'd say that, from our perspective, really comes down to three things. Number one, how do we be more flexible so that we can sort of help enable growth? We can enable flexibility from our retail customers. And really that comes down to cloud, right? So the movement of our applications into the cloud, which basically enable our customers to grow, pivot, fail fast, and move forward and change very, very quickly. So it's really important, though, to delineate. There's really two kind of directions you can take when moving into the cloud. One way, I'd call it the easy way, is to kind of lift and shift an application into the cloud and then kind of keep doing things, business as usual, just under a sort of subscription model. That's not the way that we went. We basically broke down our WMS and all of our applications and built them from the ground up in the cloud so that they could be, infinitely scalable, so that we would be truly versionless. So, Chris mentioned a couple of these things during his comments as well. The ability to be versionless and deliver new capabilities to our customers every 90 days helps us to react quickly to, industry changes, but then, to pass those adjustments on to our customers very, very quickly so they can react and sometimes get out ahead of trends before they take too long and so forth. So I think cloud is kind of number one. Number two, and somewhat related, is automation. Automation has been around a long, long time, but the pace of innovation in automation, I mean, just walk around a show like this, and you see every 2 years here at MODEX and every other year at ProMat up in Chicago, and any other show like this, you just see over and over again all the innovation of robotics and all these different things. And certainly in your sites, lots of interesting technology and automation that has gone in over the years. We've got to help make sure that our customers are as close to future-proof as possible for this automation innovation. And so we built a warehouse execution system into the WMS. Right, we were the first to do that. It was somewhat innovative when we did that. I think there's maybe another WMS company or two that have done it since then, but pretty innovative when we did it, and really helps to ensure that our customers can continue to grow and push down the path of automation growth, which has all kinds of other implications around dealing with labor shortages and some of the other things that we mentioned at the onset of this panel. So that's number two. And then the third one, which I'll kind of tease here a little bit, but I won't get too deep into. We'll talk about it here in a moment. Is artificial intelligence, right? AI. What does that mean? And as we think about kind of the future, because we are right on the precipice of that, even though we've been hearing about it, it seems like forever. Think about how long ago did you hear for the first time about ChatGPT? It wasn't that long ago, right? But there's just the pace of innovation there is incredibly high. So we've got a lot of things to talk about there. So we'll hit that in a moment.
I think one of the comments made future-proofing that's critical to us too. So kudos to the industry writ large, whether it's a software company or some of the material handling and the automation companies that we're seeing here on the floor. Being flexible, agile, modular in some cases. Those are all key sort of lenses that we use when we're looking for technology. We don't want to put something in and then find ourselves trying to modify it or adapt it, 3 or 4 years later. We preferred it to be sort of core and have that flexibility to move when we need to move. So it's a good point.
So here's another option here, guys. What do you think about the potential? Let's see if we have any triggers that happen here for our friends on the panel. Adam and Grady, knowing Manhattan is investing heavily in these kinds of solutions, Carter's is intentionally tinkering, right? There are pathways here. There's enterprise AI solutions that are out there. I'm curious from your product suite perspective, where does it make sense? Just start with that. Where are the areas where you're seeing adoption, where you're seeing, sort of like we call no regret decisions, right? It's like, yeah, like that's an obvious place. Let's go there. How have you guys thought about that from a product perspective?
Yeah, sure. Look, when we started, I would say intentional tinkering is a great term. I love it. I feel like, I hope that we're a little past that from a product development perspective now. But just 6 months ago, I would say we were in that phase, right? And what we've come to find out is that there's really a couple of different ways to apply AI inside, specifically the warehouse, across other applications as well, but we'll stick to the warehouse. One is, if we look at all the different roles inside the warehouse, we want to provide an assistant to each of those roles, whether it's a receiving manager, shipping manager, pick pack supervisor, the wave coordinator, et cetera. We want to give them an assistant that's going to help them do their job better. When we first started thinking about this, it was like, okay, well, how much time can I save each of these roles in the warehouse? And pretty quickly we realized that time saved for those, 10, 15 people in the warehouse, it's not that interesting. Like, it's good, it's not that interesting. What we really need to be driving towards is decision support for those individuals such that the other 500 people in the DC can do their job better, faster, cheaper, right? And so we started to pivot from this kind of role-based assistant, to help them, kind of from their day-to-day, make things faster and better, to what KPI inside the warehouse can we ultimately go affect with this assistant, with these agents that we build into the solution. And so as an example, for a wave coordinator who spends a lot of time researching maybe failure in the wave, why did this order not allocate, what went wrong and so forth, certainly we can help make that time faster. But what we found as we've deployed it to our customers is we've seen a significant reduction in order cycle time, right? How fast can I ultimately get these orders shipped out of the DC? And that's where there's real value, right? That's where we're really helping customers, because at the end of the day, if I save 4 or 5 hours for one person, that's great. They can go do something else. But if I can, really, truly, drive measurable returns on some of these KPIs, that's really important as well. And so the other area would be, in addition to these role-based assistants or decision support agents, we're also looking really hard into things like autonomous agents. And I'll just give you an idea of what something like that could look like. This is where something needs to be automated. It needs to happen over and over and over again. But again, we've got to keep an eye on what sort of KPI ultimately is going to get affected by that. So one example of that is, how many in the room have perfect ASN data coming into your warehouse, right? Anyone? No? When inventory arrives and you're ready to receive it, we've somehow got to get, the process going of receiving. So one way to do that would be to invoke an agent to go build an ASN based on shipping documents. So we can take a picture, have an agent interpret that image, create an ASN, and now I can be off to the races and start receiving with no friction whatsoever. Just one example. There's a ton of other ones as well, but I would just categorize our innovation in those two camps: role-based decision support and autonomous agentic AI.
Grady, what's it look like on the ground? How are clients responding?
I know we're a little short on time, and there's a lot to discuss, a lot to be excited about around AI in general. So I guess I'll divide it into kind of two camps that we've seen from the services side. So number one, we have a massive knowledge repository in services, right? So we have Confluence, SharePoint, Salesforce, Jira, so many ways to get information. And so that near instant access and contextual access to all that information allows you to move much faster. So, speed to delivery with the customers, allowing them to realize their ROI sooner. Also something that our clients can take advantage of on their own end, right? Because you all have just as vast of a knowledge repository around your business as we have in our product documentation. So that's obviously really exciting. And then on the actual applicability of these agents, Adam kind of took most of it from me, that from what we've seen great success on order cycle time, doc management. The other one that I'm really excited about is labor management, right? So in a warehouse that is not 100% automated, there's always a human component. So having that access to supervisors and leadership for who's falling behind, who's ahead, how should I make staffing changes throughout the day, right? Is there a low performer in one area that I can move to another area where they have much higher performing KPIs. All of that data is accessible. You can report on it today, but most systems rely on these pre-built reports where you have to define everything up front. You have to have deterministic approaches, and AI destructures that. You can inquire a lot more on the fly with the context in the background by the agent to kind of understand what you're asking. And you have people without very deep system training that can take advantage of these features right off the ground. And so it's really exciting to see that really take hold.
Yeah, I appreciate that reality, because I think what in the word cloud we just threw up there was sort of inevitable, and these things. I mean, these are real things that are out there that are happening right now. Joel, I'm curious. I mean, we see agents popping up in lots of different applications across the enterprise. We see enterprise AI solutions that are really looking across the full spectrum, and so we're talking, about solutions that are pointed in the four walls, but indeed those four walls are influenced by things that happen outside the four walls. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, the in-app AI solutions, as these guys described, are things that are happening inside, like in this case, the WMS, the LMS, the TMS, and they're generally focused inside the four walls around warehouse execution. Enterprise AI is really the stuff you build over your own data that help you make decisions that are unique, that are unique to your business, right? But neither one of those things can happen unless you have a clean, well-governed data platform, unified data platform. So before you start talking about agents and all of the AI terms, really ask yourself, do I trust my data, and is my data accessible? And if it's not, if the answer is no to one of those things, then that's truly where you want to start. Okay.
We're getting close to time here, and I'm maybe going to toss it to Brad here for some wisdom, which I've gotten from you over the years. But as you kind of look back on the work behind you and the work in front of you, I mean, how would you sum it up? I mean, is this the starting line or the finish line? How do you see it?
It's never the finish line. That's for sure. It's fun. It's fun work, I think. Maybe I'm a little strange in that regard, but I think that something that was said earlier is a truism. All of this starts with people, and so you got to have really solid people in your organization, whether it's technical people, there's some sitting in the back here, operational people, some of my colleagues have joined us here. But it really does start with the people, and I think the other thing I would say is just the mere fact that all of you are at MODEX is probably a pretty good indication that you're curious, and that's really a key attribute, I think, to somebody that to solve problems, to figure out how to get to next, is to be curious. And so coming to a place like this is a great place to get curious. And last but not least, thanks to the group up here, I would also tell you, make sure you find good partners to help you on your journeys. You can't do it all yourself. Maybe some of you can, but we certainly couldn't. So picking good partners for our journey was critical to us. So we appreciated that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Brad, and I really appreciate you all taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. There's lots of babies that need their onesies, and we want to make sure they're ready to go. And I've been on the other side of that, and we want to make sure it shows up. We've got a couple ways to engage. I'm in the South, so a couple ways to engage, y'all. I mean, you can catch some bourbon and some barbecue. We have a happy hour. It's very close. It's walkable. They're on your seats. You can scan that QR code. Catch up with these guys. Manhattan and Spinnaker SCA have booths just right down the road. What these guys didn't tell you, maybe you figured it out from our stories. We geek out on this stuff. We like to talk about your challenges. We like to talk about how to solve hard problems, and that's really our brand. That's what we do. We embed ourselves in our clients' businesses, and we we do everything we can to make them successful. So we really appreciate you guys joining today, and we hope you all have a good and insightful rest of your MODEX. Thanks for joining us. Cheers.